Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzar-Ramosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television. Tonight we are discussing a seemingly Oscar probable Best Picture film.
An Oscar hopeful and looking good.
Yeah, Bong Joon-ho's latest film, Parasite. And I am going to be your host, Steve Ramosi, joined by Jonathan Ian Manzer.
the true Parasite.
And Scott Thurlow.
I know Morse code.
So, welcome to the show, boys. We did not prepare I don't think we were prepared a funny log line.
This movie's kind of a weird spot, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if this one should get one.
If
you think of something off the cuff here, Ian.
We swapped, what were the horse people called?
The Equisapiens.
We swapped the Equisapiens for hidden Korean men.
To a degree, that is kind of the case.
Good enough. I think I said something like Wes Anderson's Murder House or something like that, but that was an offhand one after the film, but that's the best I can do at this point.
Anyways, let's jump into the plot. And Scott, why don't you kick us off?
I'll certainly try to keep it condensed. So we center on a family of four, a mother, husband and wife, and their two maybe 19, 20, 21-year-old brother and sister. And they're sort of living in a destitute place and area in Korea, I believe, because this is a Korean film. So they are doing like small odd jobs around, and they end up sort of getting handed an opportunity by one of the son's friends. So I don't remember the names. They're all Kim, the Kim family. So the son gets a job tutoring a high school girl who's the daughter of a very wealthy couple. So
you're keeping this concise.
I'm trying to, man. Like, so he through a chain of events, through a chain of like cons and sort of blindsides, they get the whole family hired, working for this rich family, doing various jobs, the housekeeper, blah blah, this and that. And they're essentially going to parasite off of them, if you will, like, getting paid very well and also using their house when the family's away. So they're doing that. They're having a good time. And then they discover that the previous housekeeper who they got fired returns and reveals that her husband has been living in a secret bunker built into this like elaborate, very rich house. So that like takes a left turn there. It ensues. They start to have an argument. Like they're going to blackmail each other, this and that. They get into a scuffle. But of course, also then the family is about to come back. So hijinks ensue, but like darker ones, if you will. Like they're trying to like cover up the fact that there's a secret bunker and they've hidden like the unconscious bodies of the housekeeper and her husband there. And then there's a big birthday party for the son. Their son also is a bit of a troubled child, so there's like a little subplot going on there. And it all culminates in a gruesome-ish sort of like a very visceral, violent confrontation at the son's birthday party, in which a number of the guests are murdered. The husband, the rich husband, is murdered. And the daughter of the Kim family is also stabbed and murdered. Mm-hmm. So then we cut to the son survived, and his mother survived as well. They don't know where the father is. The cops are trying to find him, but they're just getting the leads. Eventually, it's revealed that he's been taken over, hidden in a bunker, and sending out, as I'll call back from earlier, sending out coded messages via the light in Morse code to hopefully, if his son is there watching, which he is. And they basically write a letter to each other in a sort of sense. And the son deigns to his dreams to get enough money to get the house back, to buy the house. There's like a quick dream sequence of like him doing that, but really what's happening is he pledges to it in his own mind and cut to black. We don't know. We're not sure. They're still on the run. He's still trapped down there, and he's living with his mother in poverty once again. So it was enjoyable. I quite was along for the ride for almost all of it. It's not quite something you see, like, it's like I said, that as we said, it's hard to describe a bit because it's a bit complex. It takes turns here and there. But I was definitely engaged with it. Now I'm looking at a decent 2. I could turn up to a 3, depending on what you guys may say, but for sure it's already earned a 2.
It starts off as a comedy of errors.
Yes, it's a bit more lighthearted for the first half or so.
turns into very bad things.
Wow, good call, yeah.
But all kind of framed on the classism and kind of working class lifestyle of what I brought up earlier. Sorry to bother you. Although I wouldn't say there's a direct one-to-one parallel there. I believe thematically they're similar, and except with a more sympathetic or richer family. I like in this how there's no unselfish character in this work, and this is where I come up with very bad things. Is that like everyone's kind of likable, but also everyone's kind of self-serving. But maybe out for themselves is too much. They're out for their family, and it's people who are likable, but there are not enough resources for everyone in a sense, and they're fighting for those resources. It's a very actually tragic film on that, and especially for in a way that actually all of the families suffer in this, but it's really like especially the two, to use the term, peasant families in this, or the lower class families who are employed, are backstabbing each other in order to get the crumbs scraps off the plates of the rich family. It's a decent. I agree with it too on this.
So I think that is getting a little bit into themes. I'm going to come back to the not enough resources thing because I think that's interesting, and it's going to definitely play into the themes of what we're going to talk about. But as far as the plot of this goes, I was pretty highly entertained by the movie all the way throughout, and not only entertained, but like it definitely kept my attention.
Yes.
I didn't feel like it ever kind of lagged or sagged or anything. It was a really interesting 3-act structure wherein every act had its own feel. Like it had its own like almost cinematography even. And like and its own like visual like feeling to it. And I really liked that, and that's going to play into style as well, but I think that just those changes and when they were happening, like, you know, the moments that they happened, I thought was really interesting to see, as far as how the plot changed itself together. Like the first one you really notice is like when the doorbell rings and it's the housekeeper outside, and then you cut to like her face, and but in terms of, sorry, I'm getting away from the plot again. In terms of the plot, like
we'll come back to that.
The first part is kind of like this happy-go-lucky, almost like comedy. I felt like it was setting up a different movie than what happened at the end, but like not in a bad way, but like in a
pretty good soul roll.
It's the setup for the plot, but it's not the setup for the tone of the plot, I guess. And then so like and then the second part happens, and it's like this very tense discussions, and like they have these discussions among the characters that are that the feeling is a lot more tense. And then in the third act is like this just like bloodletting, you know, literally, and like letting go of all that tension in a really good and like paced out way, I thought. So I think I'm gonna give this a 3 in terms of plot, and that's kind of
the arc structure is definitely you're watching them grow above their means, and then the fallout from that. The thing is, I don't believe this was perfectly paced. I was getting restless towards the end of it, really? And that's why it's a solid 2, but I don't think I can switch over to a 3.
I think I might. Like, you made a good point, and I'm going to bring up something back that we sometimes bring up, but we covered it for sure previously. I thought there was both emotional conclusion and like the actual action of it concluded. Like,
but I believe in the talk we had prior to this cast, you disagreed with the emotional conclusion of this.
No, I didn't.
In saying that the son's what seemed like the son's death didn't end up turning out so.
That did feel a little cheap, but yeah, I did. You're right. I did say that, but I'm saying like overall, like,
and as the primary protagonist, which would have been shocking if they killed the man that they set up as the protagonist throughout, like that. I think that would have actually been a stronger punch to the absurdity of the ending than
I guess that's a fair point too.
Than kind of coming up with a feel good.
You're not wrong about
let's
it.
Let's not call it feel good, but
most of the families
you're saying it lessens the impact, or like lessens the punch. I guess I get what you're saying, E. And yeah, like you're right. I did mention that I felt it was a little like a slow roll that I didn't like, or was a little less effective than it could have been, or they wanted it to be. It seems, but I might still give it a 3 because I do think it was paced pretty damn well, maybe better than you think it was. I do like there's a very clear like. Act 1 left, hard turn, and then Act 3 hard turn, and then it all kind of not wraps up, but is concluded in a way that doesn't leave that much dangling.
Have you ever seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang?
Yeah, of course.
Where they're like, hey, why don't we bring everyone back in? They have like Lincoln come back in and do that. And that's what it kind of felt like to me at the end. It's like I saw this man get bludgeoned to death, and then but that's not my only issue with it. I just towards the end it was kind of I'm like I kind of saw where it was going, and I'm like...
You wanted it to end right after the dad kind of runs away, right?
Yeah, that would be great.
You can't... Like, without the son being alive, you can't do any of that whole last part.
Yeah, the last, 20 minutes.
I mean, the dad could be alive, but no one would ever know. Mm-hmm. And, so,
Or you could have him in the basement.
I don't... Well, I mean, you could... Yeah, I guess you could just show him in the basement.
Cut to that.
Or whatever. But, that, I don't...
It's a bleaker ending. But
that being said, I mean, I think it's a pretty bleak ending anyway. Yeah. I don't expect this kid to ever buy that house.
He's not going to do his dream, probably not.
I think his dad is going to die in that basement or get discovered at some point.
It's all about the illusion of upward mobility, which we're going to themes there. But
that's exactly what it is. This entire movie sets up that hope is unfounded or misguided, right? And there's no reason to believe that this final Gambit will be any different than his previous Gambit. So I think there's different ways to look at it. And if that movie had ended as his dad was with bloody hands running away from that scene, I would have no problem with that. I also didn't really have a problem with the way that it did end.
Same here.
That it went on and the kid survived. I thought that well, I don't know. I didn't have a problem with it. I think that it was like I've been saying, this is kind of a different. This is a different style of storytelling than I'm looking at. It's not like your standard Western nihilistic take on things. It is definitely a nihilistic take on things, but it's more of you get that weird. I need this epilogue. What happens a lot in like I was saying anime or it also had kind of a. I don't know. Anyway,
I was saying I was getting restless towards the end. I was waiting for it to wrap up. I
wasn't quite to that degree, or I really wasn't restless. I was fine with it. So I think I will bump up to a 3. I think it did at least hit all the points for me on the scale that it tips over the line to a 3.
All right.
So that's where I'll end off on plot.
Sounds good. I'm going to get started with themes here.
Roll it over.
So, I mean, the big theme, which we've already mentioned to a small degree, is the classism that's involved in this. The Kim family is, at the beginning, shown to be pretty poor, and then they slowly integrate themselves into this richer family, the Park family, by kind of
various deceptions,
quote unquote, killing off all the people that work for them, not actually killing them, but getting them fired, shuffling them out of the way. Yeah, maybe later killing them. But it is interesting that this film is called Parasite, and it just shows that them integrating themselves into the entire system of this family. But I am also interested in how they get found out and what that means in terms of the name, or Parasite being a theme of this film. The term Parasite being a theme, and is that the kind of built-in defenses of the Park family that they don't even know are there, fighting back somehow? This guy is a mainstay of their house for the last 4 years. They don't even know.
Well, but the thing is, everyone's completely replaceable. He's not Mr. Kim. He's the driver in a sense, even though they might call him Mr. Kim. We're just replacing one housekeeper for another without any...
they're a servant.
Yeah, they might as well be chucked in the basement after they're done with them and replaced with a new one.
Yeah. But I mean, that's not like that. That's the thing. The Kim family convinces the Park family that's the case. But before they came around, they always described these people as like, oh, I always thought this driver was great. But then they plant like that little seed of doubt. Yeah. Or like, I always thought I loved this housekeeper when he says that like she always made the best ribs or whatever. He was like, it's them planting the seed of doubt and removing them so that they can come in and like fill that position, which pays them. So it is like a really interesting exploration of the parasitic nature of the whole film. And like, I don't know, not only that, but you get a lot into the class struggles and like the Kim family being this poor family that is just trying to find any angle and event. There's a scene where the dad, Mr. Kim, says, what does he say? He says something like, "Oh, I'm so glad that," or like, "Thank God the Parks like let us into their family so that because, between the four of us, we're making like great money right now," or something like that. And you can imagine that if they kept on this, if they hadn't been discovered for what they were, they could have kept doing this for years and actually made decent money, just being con men, supplanting the previous structure of the park.
And house slaves got paid.
Yeah, like listen, well. Yeah, their plan was essentially harmless. I'll say, like, right? They get people fired. Yes, that's right. They're like the biggest thing they do, but not all of them. Like 2 of them show up as tutors. Like they're not replacing anybody. They're just like ingraining themselves into the lives of this rich couple who. So Ian asked me this. I wanted to bring this up, and I want to do it here before I forget. Precast. He was like, "So who was the parasite in this movie?" And I was like, almost everyone, including the Parks to a degree. Like they're almost feeding off like they need some kind of like substance or some kind of, if not companionship, something they're getting out of having the servants like there, even if they don't like view them as equals.
It's not that they're a parasite, but they enter into a symbiotic relationship
yes,
with their
exactly.
with their quote unquote parasites. And I don't want to like simply label the Kim family parasites, but like
it's certainly more complex than that. But
they get into like this, they're like the fucking, what are they? The rhinoceroses and the little birds that the birds like land on them and like eat the fucking
like the birds that clean the alligators' teeth and shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So they get a meal. The alligators get shit pulled out of their teeth. Like that's kind of what they were going for, I think.
Sure.
Well, what's also very interesting is the occasional looks at the happenstance of birth. So. The Kim family gets especially the son gets a rock that's supposed to bless them. Well, in a sense, it does. There's kind of a mild supernatural, but it's not really.
Not really.
But it's kind of. But it's also the wife of the Park family says that we have a ghost in the house that's supposed to bring wealth to the family. So both of them kind of attribute their success not to merit, but to kind of luck or supernatural, and. The wife of the Kim family says, I would be nice too if I had the wealth. The father, in his desperation, especially at the end when they lose their house to the flood, he's in the gym saying, you never have plans because if you make plans, it gets shattered and it's best to just hold on to nothing because you're never disappointed. There's that entire, like, the desperation of the poor and almost the happenstance of the rich being born in the right spot. Now, granted, I'm not saying that the rich, the Parks here were fairly sympathetic. The father less so.
Bad people, really.
But I think the whole point is that all of them were real people. It just happens that one group was
one side of the train tracks versus the other. No, I get it. I think you're right, and I mean, all that stuff was certainly there. And I want to say it was built in clearly to the plot and to the story, but without being obtrusive about it. I want to say, like, without being in your face constantly. And I think at this point, I will give films a lot of credit, any story really, that manages to do that, like to clearly highlight and explore a bit of the classism and everything you were just saying about the relationships between two different types of people and types of social structures, right, stratospheres, but also integrated like a small, like a slice of life, if you will, story that may be a little bit.
Slice of the most ridiculous.
That's what I'm saying. Like, yes, a sort of hyper realized version of that.
Sure.
But I still think both of those things, like the twin themes of those concepts, they hit upon and really like welded it pretty well, like melded it through.
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to quickly mention.
I'm giving it a 1. Sorry if wasn't clear. Go ahead.
Now I don't remember exactly what you said before. You mentioned something about like there weren't enough resources for everyone, and they wanted to. They basically had to like duke it out over them. But I think this is something that gets talked about a lot in conversations about the wealthy versus the poor, or the wealthy versus the lower classes. Like clearly there were enough resources for everyone because the Kim family made a good living while they were being the servants basically of the other families.
But so I was more talking necessarily about the fact that they had to take out competitors on their own class.
But that's the thing. I don't think that even if they had employed 4 more people, the Kim family would have been, or the Park family would have been that put out. It seemed like they were pretty rich. So the thing is that they are forcing people to compete for resources that are
technically not
available for all of them, right? Like,
hey, the parks are job creators here.
Sure.
If guys, that kid gets stabbed, no one has a job.
Hey, man, somebody's got a job. Somebody's got. Hey, I mean, there's got to be an undertaker, right?
He's
creating jobs. Mr. Kim is creating jobs.
That's the one profession that never is in need. But no, I'm giving themes a 1 for mostly the stuff you said previous to that.
Yeah,
I think it was well handled.
All right, Ian, antagonist.
Basically what we just said.
Everybody?
Yeah.
Everyone's antagonist. I guess we are following the Kim family. So, I don't know if the Park family... I mean... At points, they are, especially when their dreams of being one of them. They thought that even if they climbed out of the sewer, basically, that they lived in, and literally at one point,
exactly,
that they would find kind of some kind of respectability, but they realize that they're still looked down upon, specifically Mr. Kim.
Yeah.
Well, towards the end... quote unquote Kevin. I'm just going to use. I apologize for this, but I'm just going to use their Americanized names whenever possible because I'm terrible at pronouncing these names. I'll try it once. I believe it's Kim Ki-woo, which that one's not that bad actually. But Kevin, the Kevin character, says persona. At one point when he's looking out the window and like kind of staring out the window, is like, "Do you think I would fit in here?" Yeah. And she and the daughter of the Park family says, apparently says, yeah, and he's like, okay, like just kind of wanders away in a daze. I mean, granted, he had just lost his house right before that, but it's like that's the moment where the movie's telling you, look,
no matter what
you do, you're never gonna fit in here. No matter who you are,
can't escape the stench of being poor.
Yeah. Oh, they
literally
talk about that too in the film. When they talk about Mr. Kim's
unique
smell.
But not
like the subways.
Yeah. the subway smell of Mr. Kim,
like a radish,
an old radish.
Or
but
a
no, like
rag.
You're right. Like I was going to say something like basically cop from themes to put it into antagonist, like the victim of circumstance, like your lot in life essentially, right? Which could easily switch places. Like the Kim family could have been the rich family, the Park family could have been the ones trying to scam them. So like, I mean, I'm going to give it a 1 for antagonists. I'm not going to point to any one element or at least character or something in the film because I think it's just that it's life. And I know it seems like a cop out as well default answer, but I still think it's valid and relevant. That's why we have the troubles we have in real life outside of films like this to a degree. So yeah, I mean, just that is going to be a 1 for me.
Silver spoons in the mouths of babes are really the because again, it's the people who were born into and I think that's what's really stressing here, that there's nothing the Parks are. Right, granted, the father of the Parks, the patriarch of that, he seems like a fairly adept individual and intelligent individual, but beyond that, there's nothing about him that's merits that wealth beyond
exactly.
what seems like circumstance.
I wouldn't say that he's any smarter than any of the members of the other family. You know, like
I said, he could be driving Mr. Kim around in some alternate variation.
Driving Mr. Kim.
Yes, it would be a good movie. But no, I mean, because of that,
be just
effect,
as bad as driving Miss Daisy.
Yeah, like I think I'll make one point or final point is for me about antagonists. I think it would have been lesser. The effect would have been blunted, if you will, if the Parks were like outright like just asshole people,
just villains.
right? Yeah, and they were not.
Agree.
So,
I guess Kim Jong Un, because he does make
he gets a passing reference / mockery.
I mean,
I think South Korea is constantly antagonized.
He's the only reason that bunker is in that house. Yeah. So, fucking Kim Jong. Well, actually, Kim Jong Il really, because
that
was
the bunker was made during his era.
Yes.
But
anyway, one for antagonist for me.
Sure, I feel that the Kims were very antagonized.
They had to scramble to figure out the circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, maybe plans are the antagonists.
Plans could be the antagonists.
Hopes and dreams.
Exactly. What's he?
Hoping to become better than you are. Stay in your station, this movie says. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the case. But anyway, let's move on to protagonists. And that's going to be you, Scott.
All right. So, I mean, I'll go with the whole Kim family. Now, granted, we sort of start off following Kevin / Kim Jong-woo. Is his Kiwoo, right? So he sort of is, or even his friend actually is the impetus for all this, for the events that unfold.
Min?
Like Min shows up for 10 minutes, like offers him a deal. So, but I think the whole family, because like that's what got me. Like in the first half hour or so, 40 minutes, like right, he gets an in with the Park family. Then like he picks up like, oh, I can use this little thread trail that I've learned about them to like get my sister in on this con, and then she like it's a chain down the line, right? Then she recommends her father as the driver, and so on and so on. And then you see like all of them like doing their different jobs and interacting with the Park family in various ways. And then also like then cut back to them in their hovel, like being like, "Yo, we got a pretty good deal going. We got a good setup here." So I'm saying I think all four of them, the family itself,
I agree.
The family unit is the protagonist, and they were all great characters. I enjoyed them a lot. They're fleshed out. Like nobody was one dimensional. I believe their dynamic, their chemistry between each other, and I was sold on the ride of following them along and how they're gonna keep the ruse going with the Park family.
I was so impressed with how like a family they were in the way that like there was. You're right. There was no like artificial like leader like injected to make this movie like seem like it had one protagonist more so. I mean that was Kevin's role kind of in the beginning, but that kind of goes away. And like when you get to the scene where they're all in the living room, looking out the window, watching the rain, and it's the precision with which the conversation passes back and forth between all of them
good call.
Is amazing, and like a combination of like style, dialogue, and protagonist really in this conversation. But like it worked so well, and like how they passed it around amongst them, and like nobody, like everybody had their say. Like they were this family that was doing this together, and it was really made a point that they were doing it together. They weren't like they were all in.
They're not backstabbing each other or anything.
They all had each other's backs. They all were looking out for each other, even if they weren't looking out for anybody else in the world, which is kind of part of that conversation too. But like I really loved that scene, and there are a couple of other scenes that were very similar, where it's like, look, there's nobody here that's like the hero of this movie. There are protagonists, and it's
just
them.
This is their story. Yeah. So I'm giving a very strong one.
I like it because they're mildly slapstick, but not over the top.
Yes.
It's mildly Logan Lucky, but not over the top.
Right.
Because the kind of heist scene at the opening, really, even though they're doing things I don't agree with, especially in screwing over other people to gain, I'm rooting for them still. I mean, the entire family is charming, and I think the acting jobs of them to make them all,
it really went a long way.
Like even the bitchy sister is charming in her own right. And
I actually loved her. I thought she was one of my favorite characters.
But like she's perhaps, or the mother was cold. Not cold, but she was the strict mother. They all had like kind of archetypes, but with more dimensions than just archetypes.
Exactly.
And I think it worked really well.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to give it a very strong one.
Yeah.
Perhaps the strongest one I'm going to say for this, because I think that is the heart of this movie. If their performances didn't work, this movie wouldn't work.
I was 100% sold on them, and they did a great job. So
one of my favorite ones, there. All right, we're going to move on to supporting with me. And I guess it's the Park family is part of this. Although,
and the housekeeper and her husband.
I almost put the Park family as I almost don't want to call them supporting, because I feel like they're part protagonist, part antagonist.
Foils.
I look at what's that?
Foils, would you say?
Yeah, I mean they absolutely are.
Yeah,
but I look
100%.
at the other housekeeper, her husband, the other driver, maybe the son and daughter
of the Parks,
to a degree. But even them, they definitely play a foil, and I like that they have the two families that are, they have the same
somewhat parallel dynamic.
They have the same constituent parts.
Yes,
right? They have a mother, father, daughter, and a son, and I really like that the interplay between those families. So I know I'm talking about them during supporting, but I almost don't want to call them supporting characters. I would say that I thought the housekeeper was good. Mm-hmm. I thought her husband did a very good job as
the hidden Korean man.
Yeah, the hidden Korean man.
Secret agent Korean man.
Other than that, everybody else was fine, but mostly forgettable.
I mean, it wasn't a huge cast, really. That's pretty much it.
I guess you had Min.
Min, sure.
He was
the intro.
The driver. That's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Cody.
But I have to say that the original housekeeper, from her introduction, which I thought she was going to play a very different role in this film, perhaps in a sense the almost the direct antagonist. You could have seen that going
the widest arc.
Yeah,
but she could have remained the housekeeper and been the one to unravel their plan, that kind of antagonist role that you often see in that kind of the overprotective
that setup.
But having her fall from grace and return kind of dirty and bloody and at the same level as the family and playing the dirty tactics of that family, I think made her a very intriguing character.
Let me ask you a question, because I forgot to go back to this in my mind while we were watching the movie. When her husband was like, "What happened to your face?" That wasn't was that the allergies? Or did something else happen to her that we never find out about?
Happened to her,
she got fucking beat up or something. We never find out about it, right? What the hell happened?
Yeah, that's true. It was kind of uncommented upon. Now that I think about it,
I completely forgot. I made a mental note in my mind to go back to that by the end of the movie. Just remember this so that when you find out about what happened, you can and
I just assumed that she was doing some rough living.
Maybe.
Or something like that. But yeah, it's something we should have discussed after the movie, and perhaps not. Yeah, but you're right. Little interesting point there. But I mean, I'm gonna be more confident, if you will, in putting I'm okay with putting the Parks and anyone who isn't the Kim family is perfectly fine for me to go in the secondary. And I think they all did a great job. Now maybe they're given more time and more rounded out, more robust characters than your average secondary supporting characters. But because it was the way the plot was framed, because it was a family and a family, they had a more prevalent role. But I think they were all great, and even the housekeeper and her husband as well.
Do either of you remember when we did a separation, whether we counted the secondary, the other family in that secondary?
I believe we did.
Then I will have to conclude the Parks as secondary.
I have,
because that's.
I won't bet on it, but I'm pretty sure we did. Yeah.
Something you just said made me think of looking at it this way, and I want to just briefly do this. So I will say that the Parks in this film, I thought all of them had the least character development. I thought that the Kims all had a lot of character development. I thought that the housekeeper had this gigantic, but perhaps the most, the biggest arc from where she started to where she ended. And her husband too, going from this somewhat mild-mannered guy,
meek, like you ever seen like
very meek guy to like just a fucking serial killer by the end of it. This movie was like a
spree killer, I think is
a film. Yeah, I guess. But this movie was like a wash with like these big character arcs, and the Parks didn't really play into that. So I don't know what that means for how you want to grade them. Excuse me, how you want to grade them. But I
mean, I think they're still secondaries, regardless if their arcs were smaller. Even
I'm going to give secondary 1 regardless. But
I
something
sure
to
am
think
too. Yeah, no, you're right. Fair enough. But I mean, again, like because of the nature, like the parasitic, like symbiotic nature, as you pointed out, they were like there, sort of like as a level, like plateauing as characters in a sense, versus the dynamics of the others. Yeah. But they were still, I still think they were portrayed well and went a lot to selling the world and the story that was unfolding. So I'm definitely giving them a 1.
1 for you as well, Lee?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on to dialogue, and that's all you.
Like I said before, because the acting of the Kim family, I think, was the crux of what made this film work. The dialogue here also was key to making this film work, because for having such, in a sense, complex but somewhat unlikable characters across the board, they had to juggle making them sympathetic and but also make them intriguing and complex.
Yeah.
And I think the dialogue... I once saw something that... actually, I brought up a Separation earlier. Separation followed the rich family and their troubles, and that is a tragedy. And I love that movie. I think it's one of the best films I've ever seen. This one is a comedy because the tragedy is when the rich fall, and the comedy is when the poor... both of them go on the same path, but you laugh along with the comedy of that. And
I see what you mean.
I forget the entire term, but it was an interesting discussion about like the tragedy versus comedy. And this was for a foreign language film, I thought this was very funny. Not just sight gags, but dialogue wise, I thought was very well. Even though I don't speak the language, the intonation,
exactly. I was going to say that too.
Worked really well, and I thought this was a phenomenal film when it came to the script.
I mean, I agree. It was that's what made me think of like the Wes Anderson thing. Like it was snappy, and again, it all sort of flows to or builds upon that believable, like the portrayals and the acting and the writing, like the actual exchanges between them all. Add it to that, and yeah, like I chuckled quite a bit throughout, like at the jokes, like when I think when the film wanted me to, and then when it got. As Steve was mentioning, like the more philosophical things, like got serious. That was also really well done too, and again, well acted, well executed. So yeah, the dialogue is well above average, I would say, and it all again adds to it. It fits perfectly to the plot and to the actions and to the story. Again, the somewhat hyper-realized, absurd things that are happening, but it still is perfectly grounded in reality, so it doesn't go too far beyond. And when people are like going back and forth with each other, like the scene you mentioned, Steve, certainly was a highlight. The family together. I think another one of my favorite scenes, speaking of dialogue, is when they're rehearsing like what the father's going to say. Like that was really fucking funny as hell, right? It was fucking amazing because it would cut back and forth between them rehearsing in their little.
My favorite part was when they were predicting what the wife would say perfectly.
Yep. And then
he does it with like a slightly raised voice, like that. Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh man,
that
really
shit
good.
was fantastic, and the dialogue again, well, but like. Pretty good to great for the most part.
Yeah, I
1.
I completely agree that the dialogue for me was one of the highlights of this film, and like I found myself, I never laughed out loud at this film, but I found myself like chuckling quietly a lot, like a good amount.
Yeah,
like,
exactly, that's pretty much how I felt.
Pretty good. I never like burst out loud, maybe once or twice, but like
I wasn't belly laughing, but it was a constant, like a nice spread out of funny moments and jokes.
Yeah, and on top of that,
seriousness.
like you mentioned, Scott, I think that they had some really interesting philosophical discussions about, about their place in the world and kind of getting into that talk about where they've landed in terms of the class and why they're doing what they're doing and things like that. So I agree. I think dialogue is very strong.
Actually, it kind of goes into stranger territory for with the father's discussion of like, if I kill someone, if I like rob someone, what does it matter in this thing? I mean, like life is almost pointless.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the nihilistic element you were mentioning earlier, Steve.
Right.
Yeah. And that was still well executed and well done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, when it was funny, when the comedy was happening, dialogue wise, and tragedy was happening, like it still kept up that quality. So
yeah, I think it melded together really well.
Yep.
All right, so that's ones all around for dialogue, and Scotty, that's gonna be you for style.
Alrighty, yeah, pretty damn strong. So you sort of mentioned it earlier, Steve-O, that each act had its own sort of feel to it, like visually, which I thought was really cool. Like you sort of like and I don't say rom-com, but like, I don't know, like a Mrs. Doubtfire kind of thing, like going on for the first act. So it was like sort of shot in frame like that, and it gets, takes a left turn that's a darker-ish one, or at least a big turning point in the plot, and then it starts being shot almost if it were like a thriller or like not a horror movie per se, but like a psychological drama or something like that, right? I noticed the shots got a lot tighter. There was like the lighting was like darker and a bit different, and then for the last part of it, that sort of merges both of them. So yeah, visually, this movie's quite a treat. It's not, I don't think it's like the strongest point of the film, but it certainly was great style, and I'll leave the other component that we normally talk about in style to you for a second, but just the cinematography worked really well for the tone and the action of what was happening at any given point in the plot. So, one for me.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about the cinematography. I thought that it was really well done. Like the first act was like kind of like, I don't know if you guys noticed this, the first act was a lot of diagonal lines.
Yes. Yes, you're right.
So like it felt like you were kind of like tipping over like a lot of the first act. Like it was just something I noticed, and it didn't really stick through the whole movie. But like you saw, like anytime you were like in their little home section of the city, it was just like all the roads are like sideways, or they had like diagonal tilted camera angles, stuff like that. Really cool stuff. The audio in this was pretty fucking incredible. I loved the music that came, like the score that came through was really good, and yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that the sound effects portion was anything.
The sound design was fine.
Yeah, it was good, but it wasn't like anything to like write home about per se. But I love the score.
Yes,
love the cinematography.
Choice of score. Yeah.
Great use of colors and things like that. I'm gonna give it a pretty strong one for style.
I might regret this later on, because it could have just been this mindset I'm in now. Not that there's anything really wrong with the style. It just, I don't know. I wasn't, I guess, as enthralled with it.
Saying it wasn't a standout for you? Yeah.
Some scenes felt like a poor man's Terry Gilliam, especially during the flood scene at the end. I don't know. It's just like it was okay, and I think for the quality of the script and the quality of the acting, the style was just fine. So I'm going to deduct a point for that.
That's fair. I get it.
All right. So that's going to be 2 1s and a 0 for style.
Yep.
And we're going to go on to recommendations with me. I'm going to make it pretty simple. Yeah, I recommend this movie. I thought it was really good. Maybe not as good as my score is going to indicate in a minute. I don't know if I would call it a perfect 10 movie, but it was pretty close. And based on our scale here, in my mind, at least I guess it's a 10. So yeah, I'm going to recommend it.
It was good. Maybe verging on great. But it's not the best movie I've seen this year. And I thought it was very, very well done. I was amused mostly through the first 2/3 of the film. I really enjoyed it. And it's definitely worth a watch. I laughed quite a bit. I liked the shenanigans. But I don't know, it's just something about it that just
didn't kick it up to the next level.
Yeah, and maybe perhaps I'm don't have a really good reason for it. It's just kind of how my impression of it.
So I'm sort of going to cut up through my classic Scott Thurlow move and cut up both of your opinions. Yes, I'm recommending it. I enjoyed it. Probably it seems more than you.
So you are recommending it? Sorry. Okay, I thought so.
Yeah, he's saying it was still good, just not like as like stand out. Like I agree that we happened to have seen The Lighthouse the other week, and I prefer that like over this one, but I still think this is a strong film. It's worth seeing. It's getting some Oscar buzz. It's sort of like a part of the reason why we decided to do it anyways. But even if that wasn't the case, it's still a pretty damn strong film. Enjoyable as hell, to me at least. And yeah, it's definitely worth seeing, I think.
Yeah.
So I certainly would recommend it. I think I am giving it a 10. Now, I wouldn't say it's a perfect movie, but again, it does hit the points. I could have maybe deducted a point in plot, but otherwise, yeah, Parasite was really good.
I think it's a perfect 8.
To tie this up, all right. To tie this up, I really also just want to give a mention to while I don't think this is a perfect 10, and I'm not sure I would give it my vote for best movie of the year at this point, I am excited to see last year Roma, this year Parasite.
Yeah.
Well, as long as this makes the best picture, which
assuming it does,
it's looking pretty good right now.
How poor American cinema has been this year so far.
But I am excited to see some foreign films breaching into that best picture category because there's some really good stuff out there. So, without further ado, let's get to the scores. Scott and I gave it 10s for the same reasons, and
I almost gave it a 9, but
Ian
officially 10.
Gave this film an 8. He thought that the plot was a little bit weak and that the style wasn't quite up to snuff. So, those are the reasons we gave for this, and it is going to be an aggregate score of a 9.33333.
I'm pretty good with that.
And I think unless you guys have something else, that's going to do it for us.
No, man, Parasite, damn solid. Check it out.
Parasite, take a look. I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined tonight by Jonathan and Ian Manzer.
Poor, wealthy, it's all determined on how the quality of the booze you drown your sorrows to.
That's right. And Scott Thurlow.
And I will be finding a family to mooch good booze from very soon. Good night. See you next time.
Cheers.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manzer. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or Mott's?